Manon from Katseye is being allegedly forced to go on a temporary hiatus and potentially getting kicked out of Katseye. And sinners is Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, while on stage during a live award show, got called the N-word hard R while presenting an award. Yeah, that's a lot going on all in 1 week. But one thing is for sure, and that is that it is a terrible time to be Black in Hollywood right now. And let's really talk about it, because these two instances have really just left my mouth ajar, especially given that all this is going down during Black History Month. Hey guys, what's up? It's Imurgency and welcome back to my channel. We need to talk about this. And honestly, if this catches you at a bad time, I completely understand if you need to take a minute before you can really dive into and engage with this video fully. Because again, honestly, when I first heard these headlines last night, I needed to take a beat. I just really couldn't engage fully with what I was reading and what I was seeing because I was and am tired.
This week, 3 things happened in pop music that made me realize how much y'all actually hate Black women. And it was Leanne Pinnock releasing her debut album, Normani performing at a show in LA, and Manon announcing that she was going on hiatus from Katseye. Because why are y'all under the comments of every single one of those girls' posts or posts about them being as evil and mean-spirited as you can be?
Like, I am just so tired of seeing stuff like this happen so blatantly and so just like in your face. And I really don't think I'm alone in this. Like, it just seems like time after time after time, we are consistently reminded that, like, yeah, the world don't really give a F about Blackness or Black people. And this is very much that, because this video was initially just going to be a video talking about Katseye and Manon. And trust and believe we are going to get into that. But then right before I was about to film that video, this stuff at the BAFTAs happened with Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo. And I like, where do we even go from there? And it really got me thinking, like, this is not just a one-off thing. Like, it doesn't make sense to make 2 videos talking about these 2 different things separately, because I think the through line here over what's going on and the issues about what's going on are consistent for both and paint a larger picture about how Blackness and Black people are treated in Hollywood and just in entertainment in general, and what that says about the times we're in and the greater culture abroad. Because again, as I say all the time on this channel, like, nothing exists in a silo, and oftentimes our media, entertainment, and those that create it speak for and tell the story of what's going on in the real world. And I fear that the story that these 2 incidents are telling are not a good one. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Manon from Katseye first. So if you're unfamiliar with Katseye and the whole lore and weren't there for the gnarly era, I completely understand. Katseye is an international girl group that was formed together under the music groups Hive Geffen, which, if you're even tangentially into the K-pop world, might sound familiar, because they are also the same companies behind the very popular K-pop groups LE SSERAFIM, BTS, and New Jeans. And the group Katseye blew up in popularity because we essentially got to see the group be formed and get its start through the Netflix show Pop Star Academy, which was a continuation of the previous series Dream Academy, essentially where we saw all the girls compete for their spots on Katseye. And one of the most popular girls, and also the only Black girl in the group, Manon, initially received a lot of flack and backlash from both the company and by some people in the audience for being seen as lazy, because she would miss practices because she'd be sick, and was seen as not working as hard. It wasn't seen as wanting the role as bad as the other girls. And this narrative around Manon has been the through line of her career thus far, with a common criticism of her being that, like, she doesn't give energy or the same amount of energy, and that she's always missing or sick. And personally, I really don't like this narrative being spread about a Black woman, that she's being lazy and that she doesn't want to show up for work. And Manon has actually come out herself in recent interviews speaking about how that narrative about her has really gotten her, and how she feels like she has to work multiple times harder to just be seen as good enough to fight that stereotype. And that's really sad, but also the story of so many Black women in corporate or just generally in life, having to work multiple times harder for a fraction of the acknowledgement and success. But that's not specifically why we're talking about Manon right now. We're talking about Manon because it has recently come to light that she has been put on temporary hiatus from the Katseye group. And this initially didn't ruffle as many feathers, because it was assumed that, like, this was her decision and that she's just taking some time for her health and to get better, because she has been known to have health issues in the past. And the internet at large at first was like, all right, take some time for your health. This is a little bit weird, but, like, you know, we're here for you. Take some time and get healthy. But then shortly after, Manon herself put out a message that alluded to the fact that this was not necessarily her decision to be put on hiatus. Now, the real reasons behind why Manon was put on hiatus are not yet clear as we're recording this video, but based on her message, it seems like this is something that is out of her control. In a message to her fans, she says, "Hi friends, I want you to hear this from me. I'm healthy, I'm okay, and I'm taking care of myself. Thank you for checking in. Sometimes things unfold in ways we don't fully control, but I'm trusting the bigger picture. Thank you for standing by me, and I love you endlessly and can't wait to see you again.
Judging by this document, Manon is getting kicked out. They said that they reviewed her and the company is considering her termination because she has reduced participation in group activities, inconsistent availability, brand alignment concerns, and long-term group reconstruction plans. Like they want to reconstruct the group, I guess. Document was through Hybe and Geffen Records, and the subject was Manon, status review and group restructuring plan for Katseye.
And as of right now, there's no timeline for when Manon is going to come back. And again, there aren't many details from around the situation, but it is very weird for her to be on hiatus and for them to put the only black girl on hiatus. And it's not just that. And I could already hear the comments from like all the rage baiters being like, why are you making this about race? Well, here's the thing. And again, when I say all this, I'm not talking about any of the other members of Katseye. I love all of them, and I don't think that this has anything to do with them specifically, as much as it has to do with the parent companies and the people in control of the group. There's been a long time concerted effort to sort of minimize or not highlight Manon as much as possible. In their first song debut, for the entirety of the music video, they intentionally tried to hide Manon as much as possible behind the other members of the group, to the point where like you could barely even recognize Manon was in the video. And they've done a lot of similar stuff with some photos that they take, where they will intentionally cover up pictures of Manon to essentially what feels like soft launch a group of 5 instead of a group of 6. And that is just generally weird, especially given the fact that from the fans' perspective, Manon is definitely one of the most popular. And the situation has just generally gotten so weird, especially from the inside out. One of the girls in the group's father, Daniela's father, after the news broke, got really weird on social media in their replies and how he was talking about Manon and the whole situation. Again, just very odd, saying things like, we need girls who can grind. Katseye's a powerhouse, the show must go on. Exclaiming that like 5 members are okay too instead of 6. Even going as far to talk about Manon specifically, saying that she should come back when she's ready to work. Which, insane. And I think this is very odd coming from the dad of one of the girls. Like, for one, you should know better than to say some stuff like this, because this looks bad on your daughter and just generally the group. And like, what was the goal in saying?
Way y'all are eating up Daniela's dad under his Instagram. Thank you guys, Manon. We love you forever and always. Black queen always. Why? Who he thought he was? Commenting that under that post about the girl? Are you serious? Knowing that last week they were hating on your daughter, so you prefer another member to suffer with more hate, and a parent from the group commenting such hateful things. The show must go on.
And this just generally opens a bigger conversation around what one of my mutuals, Simone, so intelligently put as the consistent problem with the lone black girl and girl groups, because this has historical precedent.
If you've been following Katseye since they started back in 2023 at Popstar Academy, you know that Manon has been subjected to the most abhorrent hate. Recently, in the last couple of weeks, she and Daniela, who are the 2 non-Asian members of the group, have been subjected to unspeakable racism and hate.
Like, again, just thinking about how the black girls were treated in the girl groups Fifth Harmony and Little Mix, and seeing similar things happen to Manon, I just don't like where this is going. And I think this should be a real reality check for Hybe Geffen. Because if the internet response isn't clear enough, you can't just go ahead and do some stuff like this and think nothing's going to happen or nothing's going to change. Like, you even got artists like SZA coming out and being like, hey, girl, Manon, we love you. like we really can't be doing this. But now let's pivot into something a little bit more serious. And that has to do with the Michael B. Jordan, Delroy Lindo of it all that happened at the BAFTAs the other day. So again, if you aren't familiar, both Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo were presenting an award, the first award at the BAFTAs. This was literally the top of the show. And as they were presenting the award, you can hear in the background someone screaming out the N-word with the hard R at them. And I think they both handled the situation with grace. And it's really sad that they have to handle things with grace and that they're applauded for that. And the BAFTAs kind of just let it air. They didn't edit it out. They didn't really do any sort of chops. They just left it in there and kept it rolling. And normally this would be a quick conversation over like condemning someone and kicking whoever said that out and just handling that quickly because racism. But this conversation is a little bit more nuanced because the person who screamed the N-word at them does deal with Tourette syndrome. And apparently the N-word is one of his tics. Right. And the person who shouted this was John Davidson, who was also there that night because he was the real life person who inspired the film I Swear, which was also nominated that night and was a movie advocating for and giving awareness to Tourette syndrome and life with it. And I think this is where the conversation gets really nuanced. And I do want to disclaim before we move forward that this whole situation is not an open door for ableism, and I don't want to see that in the comments. But we do also have to have a real conversation around racism, because that also exists and was, whether you want to claim it or not, on full display last night. And the internet is really split around the situation, because you have some people saying that it was wrong for Davidson to be yelling out the N-word at two black people at an award show. And then you have other people coming to Davidson's defense saying that essentially being ableist and telling people to just like excuse it or pretend like it didn't happen, or like saying that they're making Davidson uncomfortable, and like that supersedes the harm done to black men on screen.
What I do hate and what I'm seeing is that people online are throwing out ableism to disregard the actions of John Davidson, to disregard the respect and dignity of Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, and to say, at the expense of these two black men, this white man with disability can throw out slurs.
And again, I want to reiterate, this is a very nuanced conversation, but where I fall in this conversation is just generally that like nothing gives you an excuse to be racist. And I don't know if that's radical to say. Like, disability does not give you an excuse to be racist, in the same way that race does not give you an excuse to be ableist. Like, you know, that's intersectionality. And I think that the conversation is very weird around this, because when we want to have a conversation around humanity and who was afforded humanity, conversation that are imploring people to give more humanity towards Davidson for having an outburst that is uncontrollable is really interesting to me, because by saying that, you're essentially putting one person's humanity, and if you want to go there, one white man's humanity over the humanity and safety of two black men that were real world affected, and essentially dehumanized publicly on live camera on national TV, actually international TV, because BAFTAs are British, and the world is just supposed to be okay with that. Like, no, like there's just no world where that's okay. And I'm not saying this for like all situations, but in the case of this, if this was a possibility, if this was like a known possibility to happen, there should have been one, ample briefing so that everyone in the room knows that this is a possibility, and or two, you shouldn't have set up either party to be in this situation, because yeah, it's making both parties unsafe by being there. Because most importantly, it's incredibly disrespectful and incredibly unsafe to have two black men being yelled the N-word at them at an award show. And not just those two black men, but every single black person in that room. And as we'll get into in a little bit, this wasn't the only time that happened that night. And it's also unsafe for Davidson because, as with most tics with Tourette syndrome, like, they're not controllable. So I'm sure that's embarrassing for him. Again, not that his potential embarrassment supersedes the real life effects of being slurred at publicly. And I think what's really pitiful about this whole situation is that there was a piss poor apology after the fact by the people at the BAFTAs, where they apologized to the audience for potentially, maybe sometimes over a blue moon, if you squint, turn around and do a backflip, of being maybe sometimes offended by what happened. Yet there was no acknowledgement to Michael B. Jordan or Delroy Lindo, the people that were actually slurred against by the BAFTAs, by Davidson, as far as I know, or pretty much anyone, for being disrespected, being slurred against publicly. Like, I keep reiterating that because that is so wild to me. And I really think that speaks to how blackness is seen in Hollywood, because it really just shows that it doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how talented you are, how much you are recognized and revered in your industry. At the end of the day, there's always going to be something or someone to remind you that in spite of it all, you are still black. And because of that, you will still never be enough. And I think that is so disheartening, because, you know, if you're a black person living in America, that is nothing new to you. That is historically how it's been. But entertainment has always been seen as like this form of escapism, and seen as like this ideal life where you see all the glitz, you see all the glam, you're able to be transported into whatever world or whatever fantasy you want to be in. And we've gotten back to the point where even in that form of escapism, or these spaces where you're supposed to think that things are progressing and that there is a level of status there, that stuff like this still can and will happen. And the resounding fact that even in those instances, you still, as a black person, will not be acknowledged for the transgressions against you. Like, insane. The fact that those two men were not apologized to directly and immediately after this whole situation happened speaks volumes. And I think the public response to this is also just like so insane when it comes to the intersection around the conversation of disability. Because yes, Tourette syndrome is a very serious disability and something that should not be taken light of, made fun of, and should be held and handled with a level of care and respect. And that care and respect does work both ways.
Oh, one more thing. This is also part of the reason why I'm not with disability inclusion, like just having disabled people in the room and talking about disability for the non-disabled gays. And simultaneously, those non-disabled people putting me in a position that actively can cause me harm. Sorry. Because everybody thinks it's all fine and good to have a disabled person in the room until it actually comes to advocating for disabled people and talking about disability in ways that do not make me look pitiful.
We shouldn't pick and choose who is afforded grace and humanity, nor should we be weighing them against each other, which is why I think this whole discourse is just so frustrating and so infuriating, because that's exactly what's happening. At the end of the day, at least 2 people were slurred against. And I say at least because allegedly, according to Sinner's costume designer who was there, that was not the only time nor the only people that were directly slurred against that night. In fact, allegedly, there were multiple Black people that were slurred against.
I thought I was done talking about this for the night, but this situation has gotten so much worse. Hannah Beachler, who's the production designer on Sinners, who was at the BAFTAs tonight, has confirmed that the incident regarding the slur with John Davidson was not the only occurrence. She posted this thread onto Twitter. I keep trying to write about what happened at the BAFTAs and I can't find the words. The situation is almost impossible, but it happened 3 times that night. And one of the 3 times was directed at myself on the way to dinner after the show. And a 3rd time at a Black woman. I understand and deeply know why this is an impossible situation. I know we must handle this with grace and continue to push through. But what made the situation worse was the throwaway apology of if you were offended at the end of the show. Of course we're offended, but our frequency and our spiritual vibration is tuned to a higher level than what happened. I am not steel. This did not bounce off me, but I exist above it. It can't take away from who I am as an artist.
And that just isn't okay for so many different reasons. In the way that we as Black people are just expected to turn the other cheek is fucking insane, if I'm being completely honest, because at the end of the day, intent does not matter. I'll say it again. When it comes to slurs, especially slurs like that, coming from a white man to Black people, intent of saying these slurs does not matter because the impact is already felt. And the fact that that is made more complicated and more convoluted than it needs to be is telling, and again, speaks to the value that Hollywood, entertainment, and the world at large has for Black creatives, Black people, and just Blackness in general. I believe that there needs to be a very public and very intentional and direct apology to Michael B. Jordan, to Delroy Lindo, to all the people that were called the hard R that night, as well as to everyone in that room and everyone listening, because that's not okay. And I think to zoom out for the entire scope of this video, talking about like the Manon situation, talking about the Michael B. Jordan situation, is that we're reminded that to be Black in the public eye is to be publicly devalued and disrespected, and to just be expected to smile through it all. I think Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo's face while they're being called the N-word is just so telling, because you can tell that it's impacting them. You can see the shock behind their eyes, but these smiles do not fade and the show does not stop. And I think that that is the perfect example of what it's like to not only be Black in entertainment, but just to be Black in general, in a world where that's seen as a threat and as not good enough. And I think all that has happened over the past few days is definitely a wake-up call, not only to Black people as a reminder of who we are and what we're dealing with, but also hopefully to everyone else as a reminder to do better.